The J. Michaels Show.
Welcome to the show. Our guest today is Xander Berkeley. He is a wonderful actor, sculptor, painter. He does a lot of things, and he's been in a lot of stuff. You'll recognize him. Xander, how you doing today?
I'm good. Jay, how are you?
I am doing okay. A little fuzzled, but doing okay because it's been a busy day.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you too.
I've got miles to go before I sleep as well, but darn it, missing yesterday. I had to be here for you today.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, you and I have something in common. I live in Waco, and you have relatives here in Waco.
Well, in a little town, my great grandfather, two of them actually, on my mother's side, her grandfathers founded a little town called McGregor, just outside of Waco. Waco was the big town that they would get to come to on weekends.
Yeah.
See a show or whatever.
SpaceX, I think, has taken over McGregor now.
What's taken over?
SpaceX.
Oh, has it really?
Yeah, the engine facility over there where they test the engines. Man, I mean, it'll rattle the windows here when they test one of those big engines, Mars engines.
Wow, I didn't know McGregor was now home to SpaceX. It used to be my grandfather, my mother's father, had inherited a Stetson hat company, a men's clothing store in town there many moons ago. My mom had me in her 40s. So my mother was born in 1913. I know a little bit about that part of history over there because she had three sisters that, along with her, graduated University of Texas back during the Depression era.
Mm-hmm.
I have all my cousins still down in that neck of the woods.
So they haven't moved out because SpaceX is making the property values there horrible.
Oh, really? Well, I think the family home is still there. They kept that going. Somebody tends to it, but they've all migrated to other areas.
Yeah. Well, you were in this area not too long ago, sometime last year, right?
Well, it's been a couple of years since I've been down to see my cousins, but I stay in touch, and I carry my Texas within.
Yeah, there you go.
Despite other reasons that I might want to let go of it.
Okay. Well, you started your career on a show called Mommy Dearest. Let's start from there. Well, you've done a lot of things since then, but what was it like being cast in a major movie?
Well, I'd come out. I'd been brought out by an agent who'd seen me in a play in New York. I was doing plays back to back from the time I was 15 till I was 25. And I was about 23 when I got brought out by an agent that had seen me in a play. And he was moving from the East Coast office of William Morris to the West Coast and brought me out with a couple of people. And he had thought that it would, well, it was a rough first year. I think it is. Everybody pays their dues when they get to LA one way or another. And, you've left your friends and family and everything familiar, and for me, New York City, behind. And they were sending me up for a lot of big parts, and I was getting really close, getting a bunch of callbacks. And but they didn't know if I would turn into a zucchini in front of the camera, because I had never been on film, and that remained some mysterious, unknown, that they were apt to go with somebody that had been on film before for those kind of parts. And it was about a year after I'd gotten there, and I was hitting a wall, maybe I'll go back. And I ran into that agent. He left the agency, and he hadn't been able to get a hold of me. And I just happened to, while going Christmas shopping to get some gifts to send back east, I ran into Stuart Jensen, this agent, and he goes, it was just, I won't go elaborate, but I imagined I'd seen him when I went into the front room of this place, and the person didn't even look remotely like him. I thought, well, I must be just thinking about Stuart. And I went into the next room, and all the way at the back of the next room, there he was. And he sort of turned around the minute I walked in. I've been trying to get a hold of you all morning. You got to run over to the Stallmasters on 9900 Pico and pick up the script. And I think they want you over at Paramount right now. And it was that kind of thing where like, well, what? Oh. And so I hustled over, borrowed a friend's suit on my way. Bigger guy than me, so the suit looked a little shrunken as Christopher. Right. It turned out to be apt. And I looked like I wasn't really filling the suit out too well at the time. And the minute I walked in, the director and Frank Perry and the casting director, Lynn Stallmaster, big, powerful guy named Lynn, very powerful casting director at the time. And the minute I walked in, they both went, "Good to see you." I'd met Lynn in a general interview almost a year earlier when I'd first come out. And he'd remembered me and thought that I was right for this. And then they ended up, I did a nervous breakdown scene that was in the original script from Christopher sees his mother and he hasn't been able to say goodbye, I love you, I hate you, or anything. And he just has a little bit of a meltdown when he sees her dead in the coffin. I waited, I got the part because of that, and they just handed me the script and said, the part is yours. And it's like, wow. And there's a big blue sky backdrop, like permanent installment at the front end of the parking lot at Paramount, which is a magical lot. The minute you open the gates, you feel like you're in Disney World for real. And you see all these old sets that you kind of recognize, and it's just a magical place. And that's true of almost all the big old studios. I think I hear Paramount's on the chopping block these days, but it'll always have a warm spot in my heart because I felt like before there was ET, I felt like I was just flying across the lot in the air with they've given me a part and I'm good to go now. And once I got that part, even before the movie came out, it was like the seal of approval had been put on my forehead. And so I started getting guest leads on TV shows, which I targeted as a good way to get film education in a hurry.
Right.
Playing bad guys, they have another bad guy on every episode of TV back then, every week. So steady work.
So in between Mommy Dearest and Terminator 2, what all did you do in between there?
Oh, like I said, my crash course in film acting began right away with The Incredible Hulk, MASH, Heart to Heart, all these things that I thought were, like disposable TV at the time, like it was going to go and disappear. I didn't know it would be reruns forever, my learning how to act with cameras. But it's all right. It was fun, little pop culture dalliances along the way. And before Terminator 2, my second movie was Volunteers, which was right after Splash. Tom Hanks and John Candy had a little reunion in Volunteers. Nick Meyer directed that, and friend for life, the great guy Nicholas Meyer, and kind enough to also offer me the part in the room. Back then, they know you're going to say yes, so they don't worry about playing their cards close to their chest so they can get a better deal. That happened after that. But I just had a great time working on that. Not long after Mommy Dearest, it was like within a year. And a bunch of TV shows in between. And then Sid and Nancy was the movie that I did that kind of put a different seal of approval on my forehead with sort of high-level film directors. Everybody, it was on Siskel and Ebert's top 10 of the 80s. It was a very well-respected film, and a lot of people liked what I did in it, and I got work. I started getting offers back then from people that were fans of Sid and Nancy.
Wow. Do you prefer to play a good guy or a bad guy?
It depends on the character. It's funny, my daughter just had a big report on Of Mice and Men that she had to do, and I was telling her last night that I played Curly in Of Mice and Men because John Sayles, when I was like 20 years old, I could play the little guy next to John Sayles, who's 6'7".
Yeah.
And I remember at the time going into some agent in New York when I was doing theater, right in the beginning, first hitting the pavement. And somebody said, take Curly off your resume. You're never going to play a bad guy. And I go, what? I did have an innocent, sweet, young thing. Look, I remember one director called it, is my resume picture, Tomorrow's Lettuce, when I first started out. And I was playing a lot of young romantic leads on stage and stuff, but I was always kind of, yeah, good guys are a little boring, these, just to play a young lover, like, how do you play just in love? And I had, because I was a makeup artist from early on, I loved to mix it up and look like something else and someone else. And in the beginning, I definitely targeted bad guys because I just wanted the experience, and I knew that it was better odds if you focused on that than if you were trying to get the young starring role in something. And I had receding hairline early on, and I can remember they'd look at me and they'd see my eyes, and it's one thing to see from a distance on stage, you could look sweet, but I looked a little intense, I think, and they'd look up at my hairline and go, he's not really a sweet young thing, is he?
Yeah.
He's scary. And I just leaned into that. Also, they tell you back then when you leave New York to go to LA that they have to believe it when they see you walk in the room. And so I would make myself look and seem scary, not do anything weird, just be like intense and have strange energy about me, so that they would, he's safe. He shows up on time, knows all his lines, doesn't bump into the furniture or freak anybody out, but he's scary. So I kind of leaned into that and regretted it down the line when I wanted to expand beyond bad guys.
Right.
But once they peg you,
Yeah.
I remember my Texas mother saying, honey, I see you as such a sweet boy, but they just have you pegged for a weirdo out there.
Oh, goodness. Well, you mentioned the receding hairline. Did that help you with any roles where you needed to seem older than you were?
Rarely is it an advantage for anyone to seem older, unless they're. No, I mean they always want somebody that looks younger, especially when you're younger, because under 18, they have really stringent laws about how long you can be on set, right, and how many hours you can work. And then you have to get, and so people were always at an advantage back then that looked younger than their age.
Right.
And they could get work. And I would see guys I know get a lot of work early on, and like the agent that brought me out when I came up, brought me around to the different agents in the office and said, look at that face. He's going to be working when he's 75. And I go, I've been working before then, ain't I? And I was. No, he was right. And I'd had other people say that type-wise, I mean, early on, I played some heavies on stage pretty early on. And there was this idea of an aesthetic heavyweight, and that you can have a longer career. It may be harder when you're young if you seem like you know too much or have a lot of mileage on you, as it were, spiritually or intellectually or emotionally. It can be intimidating, and it can be harder to be cast in the younger roles,
right?
Because there's some cognitive dissonance or something.
Yeah.
But then, as I got older, the work became pretty steady.
When you were working on Terminator, it was a kind of a physical role, wasn't it? Where you posted something on Instagram recently where looked like they were putting something in your mouth, and then you had to get killed that way. Tell me about working in an environment like that.
Well, it was a wild, progressive leap for special effects and computer-generated imagery and CGI back in the early 90s, and yet they still did. And part of what made it so effective is that it was a marriage of practical stunt FX and computer-generated images that were sort of like dot to dots connecting the points that they had. And somebody posted a clip behind the scenes just today that I put into my story, Xander Original on Instagram. And every now and again, people will send me stuff and it says, add to your story. And I go, okay, that is a story of mine. Bing. And there's just a lot of they gave me a practice sword to sword swallow with for 2 weeks before I filmed so that I wouldn't gag reflexively. And I gag on a toothbrush. So that was a lot of unpleasant labor in preparation. And then Stan Winston, brilliant mastermind of special effects, though he was, had forgotten to take the kitchen counter into account when he was at the retractable blade that came out of the back of my head that retracted sideways was to look like it was coming through. And I had to be, he had measured it all as though I were standing up against the kitchen cabinet, and it was a real kitchen in the valley. And I had to do a back bend over it before getting that 6 inches away from it.
Right.
And so I was doing and Jim Cameron said, thanks, Stan, there goes $250,000. So we're going to have to reset it one way or another for to redo it. And I just watched Stan go white, and I went, I can try to do that. I injured my spine growing up baling hay every summer, growing with a twist, and then I carried a bunch of guys on my shoulders and flattened out the discs, and so I wasn't great spine-wise. I'd always have to be careful doing stunts that I didn't really mess myself up. And but I heroically did the back bend with the sword swallowing for a few hours as they planted. They had to take images and move the camera crew around so that they could photograph the room and have it reflect off the blade, and all kinds of weird stuff. And I've told the story. It's out there. I don't want to repeat that one too many times, but it lasted until about 4 a.m. in a pool of milk and blood that kept being absorbed into my jeans. Because then I had to be like that against the kitchen cabinet after I slumped down post blade extraction. And that was if I moved, Jim said, if you move that much, you'll this up.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. And they had to do all sorts of matte sequences from Jeanette Goldstein having her arm through to here to down, 3 different puppetry fake arms that they had for her that had turned into a blade all the way through, part arm blade and back to her arm, and then
So what we see for a few seconds on the screen is it actually took days to film it?
Well, that was all one day, that sequence, that one scene, but it was a long day and into a long, long night.
Yeah. You've had the distinction of being in a movie called Apollo 11 and Apollo 13. Do you like doing shots and scenes in movies that are kind of sci-fi or have a space theme to them?
It was just, I think, there are associative links that take place in people's mind when they see you in a certain kind of movie or a certain setting. You come to mind for them for others, but I think I may have looked like an astronaut because I was an athlete when I was younger and a pretty good student, and astronauts have to be both. And just all American sort of type that could be a scientist or an athlete. And when I was young, and I was in Apollo 13 first, and then I got cast as Buzz Aldrin. It was amazing to work on both because there were these guys that had been on the moon that were the on-set consultants, technical consultants on Apollo 13, and then Buzz Aldrin was the technical consultant on the film Apollo 11, where I got to play him. So
yeah,
I got to do his story with his with the insights that he could bring to it, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah,
so it was just a golden opportunity. I'd almost gotten cast in the Right Stuff as Alan Shepard, sort of between me and I was a little too young for it when it first came out. And but yeah, I guess I had an astronaut vibe of some kind, and I just had done the head of the PR for NASA in Apollo 13, and that was incredible because it was Ron Howard's backup. He called me his insurance policy in case the audience didn't understand what was going on. I had to do a lot of sequences where basically we had space school for 2 weeks before we started filming Apollo 13.
Right.
And the guys came in that had been at NASA in the day, and they walk onto that set and go, "Oh my God, I haven't been here. Oh wait, I'm not here. I'm here." Oh, it was just, they got disoriented how perfectly they had recreated the atmosphere of the world of NASA in the 60s when that was all taking place.
Wow.
And they had a lot of money on Apollo 13, not as much on Apollo 11. At one point I was doing the moonwalk with cables to help create the illusion of weightlessness, and my oxygen with the full real astronaut suit and helmet on, and the oxygen cord pulled out during one of the jumps, one of the slow-mo lofting leaps, and my oxygen was cut off, and mid-leap I passed out, and
oh goodness,
came over and unscrewed my helmet and took it over, got oxygen on me, and came to.
That was on Apollo 11, right?
Yeah.
That movie. Wow. Wow.
You know, the guys that did Apollo 13, I was friends with Bill Paxton from all the way back, and Tom, who I'd worked with before, and Kevin Bacon, and they would tell the stories of the Vomit Comet, is what it was called, the one that they filmed the weightlessness sequences. I'm sure you've heard
right.
Legendary tales of, they'd have to be doped up on Dramamine, and still people would hurl just because it was a little intense on that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so then you did Air Force One with Harrison Ford. Harrison's he a pretty cool dude?
Sorry, about Harrison what?
Harrison Ford, is he a pretty cool dude? I mean, did you...
Yeah. You know what? He reminded me a lot of, he had a sort of way about him that was, I feel like, because Steve Martin and him have kind of a similar look. And Steve Martin was such a huge, we just watched the documentary on him the other day. It was amazing. But he was such a huge influence culturally sort of around that time that I think that Harrison would clown around a little bit a la Steve Martin, and had a little bit of a wild and crazy guy vibe about him, but also very serious and cabinet maker. You could see how he applied his skills as a cabinet maker to the utility of shots, and working on that was great because Wolfgang Peterson was just such a smart, cool, fun, sweet guy, and Michael Ballhaus was his cinematographer, who I had worked with on Fabulous Baker Boys, and I knew him, and every day when we'd come into work, Wolfgang would go. He would have us all say, "Good morning, Uncle Wolfie. good morning, Mr. Bauhaus. He's like, and one fun story from that that I always really I like to tell because I like young directors, to hear this story because it's considered of actors in a way that sometimes the machinery of filmmaking forgets to be. And in this one sequence, Paul Guilfoyle and Gary Oldman and Bill Macy and I were in some configuration. And Wolfgang came over and he said, gentlemen, as you're all very well-respected actors, I feel I must tell you, in this particular shot, you're very small in the frame. So it will not require such very good acting. And he goes off, and then he comes back after, because it was close up on Harrison in the foreground, and we were just, so you just save your emotional investment for the shots that matter a little bit. So when they punched in, he said, now, gentlemen, you may notice that the camera has gotten a bit closer. We've even changed the lens, and so you are pretty big in the frame now. Yeah. And it will require some very good acting. Well, we must get it before lunch, or there will be no lunch. He was just always clowning around. He'd been an actor and was just so animated and fun. And right down to when I came back to do the looping, it's always interesting to come back after a spell after the film's been cut together and they're looking at it. Maybe they've run it for some test audiences and stuff. And he said, we have, in the last test audience, I think we were this close to getting a standing ovation for when you get killed. They were so delighted with your demise. I think we must add a 3-part scream as you're descending, falling from the plane.
Yeah.
Maybe the first part is you're lunging at Harrison, you're trying to get him, and so there's an effort scream, and then you look down and you see, I forget what the order was. It was you at a certain point you looked up because they did it on set.
Yeah.
And they had a big crane with a big boom arm that was going up to make it look like the plane was going down.
Right.
Against a green screen.
Yeah.
And apparently after I missed Harrison, I look up to curse my fate. Right. And so he wanted me to make some sort of scream out of that because my mouth was open enough to justify it. And I was pretty small in the frame, as they say, but you could still see me in the window of the plane. And then I look down and see my fate. And so there's another scream at that point. And he had put the scream in. He goes, I know it's very cheesy because I'm not the actor that you are. So you will have to replace this scream I did. And remember, we're going to put a lot of music and the sound effects of this plane, and you barely will hear it. And I've had a lot of people say, were you screaming at the end? And now on the day.
It sounds like it actually was a lot of fun doing it. Do you prefer movies or the steady work of a television series?
There's nothing quite like the theater. I haven't done it in a while, and I'm really longing to at this point, because you get to play the beginning, middle, and end out in chronological sequence, and the natural momentum of emotions and resolve, establishing a character, bringing it to a certain point, and then having it arrive at another point in real time, with the energy of an audience feeding you and you feeding that energy back through the character and the story. Kind of a magical thing, and I'm really missing it a lot these days, really wanting to be on stage. The film was exciting for me. I preferred naturalism over very broad theater. I had a lot of training from very early on, and I could do the triple pirouette and stop on a dime for French farce. And I knew that part of my training for camera was how to hide my bag of tricks that I had established through training as an actor. And the nuanced and subtler sort of delivery and performances in general were more interesting. I was more drawn to going to the movie theater than I was sometimes feeling a little trapped in an audience, like couldn't move. And
Yeah.
if I yawned or had to cough or something, it's hard to be in the theater sometimes.
Well, you're right
It's a
out
terrible play.
Yeah. There's no stopping.
That.
Yeah. There's no stopping. I mean, once you're on the stage, you got to do it. Whatever happens, happens.
And if you're in the audience, you've got to stay there, and you don't want to disturb the actors, and especially because you're usually there because you know one of the actors, and then you have to talk to them afterwards. And there's just something that I was, especially early on, I did some big theaters where you had to really project loud to be heard. As they would say, the blue hairs under the balcony that had a prescription, a subscription on their ticket in the back row. They would have their set seats that they would come and see the shows in, and if they were subscribers to that theater, and it felt a little unnatural to have to speak that loud to someone who's right next to you. Now everything's mic'd up. I kind of miss the theater that people had the training to be heard in the back row one way or the other.
And the theater versus a weekly television series, which do you prefer?
That's interesting. I used to be a film snob and would prefer to play smaller roles in films than bigger parts in TV shows. And I was always scared that I'd get stuck on the wrong TV show and be forever identified with some show or character that's weird. Kind of limiting. I like to be a shapeshifter and change the way I looked and talked and everything I did. And was a little wary of getting. I like flying under the radar in general. It's just always my MO. I met my wife on the show 24, and so that right away changed my attitude. And they were kind enough to adapt to the changes that I wanted to make in the character, and especially in the second season, they pitched to becoming a regular, knowing that I didn't want to get tied down to a show, but that if they established that I inhale airborne plutonium in the first or second episode, that I only had 24 hours to live, and so I didn't have to commit to more than one season. And so I was 100% in on that, and then.
You did your own makeup for that scene, for that episode, right?
Well, not just the episode, but the whole season. And I had it figured out how the radiation poisoning had all the books and information on when lesions would start to appear and when skin would start to peel. And, I didn't know how it turned out that they killed me off sooner because they had a storyline of the bomb that was bombing for them, and they needed to get rid of the bomb, and so they killed two birds with one stone. But I was prepared to keep having an ear drop off or whatever I needed to do to get to the end of the season.
Wow. Do you enjoy being able to step out of the actor role and into the makeup guy's role?
Well, back to the theater where I started, and because my father was an artist, and I got gifted a beautiful professional makeup kit and a book on stage makeup when I was young, showing an interest. I had skills, and that was how I would get into a character, was by getting the makeup on. And when I saw something other, and whatever it was, could be a little nuanced thing, that a tilt of the brow or bringing out some angularity or and I did age makeup. I got, especially when it was like all college students, I started playing older, younger. It did work to my advantage, getting great roles when I was younger on stage, because I could do the makeup and make myself age. I could do age makeup. That was always like a fun way, and it remains to be a fun way to shoehorn into a character. It's one of my favorite things is the costume fitting. Invariably, the costume designers are just such cool people. I've just had incredibly great experiences and friendships with costume designers as I have key makeup, because it's a collaboration, and like you bring in some of your clothes that sort of suggest what you had in mind for the character, and they've got racks of stuff, and you try stuff on, and when you find the look of the character, how they would dress, and when you find the look of the character, what they look like, you're there for me.
Yeah.
That's just.
Have you ever considered, or have you ever done it, gone from actor to director?
I directed a play when I was 25 and early years in LA, and I won a Dramalog Award and a big write-up of directors to watch for. And then I just kept getting just enough acting work to not have to put it all on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like a director, in a lot of ways. I know I should be directing. It's the not the road not taken, but the gesture yet to be fulfilled. And my interest in as a visual artist tie into it, because you have to create a story visually and
Right.
fill a frame. And
Would you rather direct a TV series or a movie?
I think an independent movie. That's my preference. Is still, I've gotten to work on some great series, and they're doing incredible TV now. So, but I would want to establish do a little independent, I don't know, a little smart art horror film maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very choosy about the horror that I've done. I'm working on one now, and I'm really excited about it. And it's sort of, I just did Candyman and this movie, The Dark and the Wicked, a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Small movie, but really good. And, what's his name? Eggers, that did The Witch.
Yeah, okay.
And he did The Lighthouse, and he has a huge career now. But The Witch was, he's from New Hampshire, and it was written as a New England folktale. And we've been trying to get tax incentives for film brought to Maine here, where we are.
Right.
And I have a couple of stories that I'm batting around that would be great movies for me to direct up here. That's what I want to do. Stay close to home. That's the other thing. Once I had kids, is when I was going to start directing, and you just have to be away. You have to be there every day and gone.
Yeah.
And then you're in post-production, and it was easier to just keep taking acting work, but it's something I'm destined and determined to do. Will do it. Damn it.
What attracted you to playing Gregory on The Walking Dead?
Well, nothing attracted me to it originally. They reached out to me, and they very secretive. I hadn't watched the show, so I didn't know. But the description of the character was not appealing, and at the time, I was trying to separate myself from the bad guy thing. Just sort of like, I would like to try to play somebody that you don't despise, just to see if I can pull it off.
Right.
Yeah. I remember one time a friend was getting their first movie, and said, well, what about this part? And we really go, no, we have to like him. You like me, don't you? We've been friends for 25 years. Oh, no, I know, but just when they see your face, they just, not if you're supposed to like me. You'll see a different face, because I change the face each time. And I become who you're supposed to become in order to tell that story. And I have proved here and there, and the chances that I've gotten mostly in independent films, that not as many people see, that I can be likable.
Did you know ahead of time that Gregory was going to last a couple of seasons, or did you think?
Yeah, it was a series regular, and they described and they had a couple of scenes they wanted me to read, and I just told my agent, wait, I think we have enough footage of me playing and douchebags.
Yeah.
they can make an offer if they want. And I remember by my agent said, "You're not going to go in." No, no, let them offer it to me. If they want me, they'll know. And because I'm not getting anything from the script, because it's not from the script, it's some other scene they want you to read from. It's a big thing that's been for a while, that things that are so secretive that they don't trust the actors that have been working for decades to hold or keep the secret, that they're going to spill the beans or something. And so you don't get to read the character, you don't get to read the whole script for films that are highly protected. And it's really hard to do your job as an actor if you can't see that. So basically, when I got home, Scott Gimble had called me on the phone, the executive producer, showrunner, to talk me into playing the part. I said, "So why do I want to play this guy?" Because as I see it, and from the looks of it, he's just kind of a douche.
Yeah.
I want my kids, when they're flipping through the channel someday, to see me as something other than. And he goes, "Yeah, but here's the thing. I used to be a comedy writer." Scott Gimble, that was his pitch. And what I like about your acting is that you bring humor to something without making it obvious. You make something funny without it looking like you're trying to be funny.
Right.
And it feels like it's the character just that you're laughing at rather than the actor getting a laugh.
Yeah.
And that's what I really want for this. And he said, I'm a pop culture junkie at the end of the day. And I just have this image of you as George Mason from 24 and Trevor from Grand Theft Auto facing off. And I hadn't watched Grand Theft Auto. I didn't know, I didn't play video games. And so I didn't know who that was, but he was absolutely right. He was a great little matchmaker, and Steve and I had a great chemistry and a blast working together. And I'm so glad I did it at the end of the day because it was funny. And
Gregory kind of seemed like at first, when we first meet him on the show, he's a little overbearing, but kind of confident or whatever. And he sort of gradually falls apart because he's placed in a situation or situations where he's not in control. You did that so well with that character.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and he's compromised from the start.
Yeah.
And it's revealed the extent of his compromise, and the more it becomes clear to those around him that he's basically a con artist and a selfish bastard who's cowardly and protecting his himself and appearing to protect the community when he's not really. And it's funny that there were some things that I had to do in that are in the rule book. Like I can remember old actors would say, "Never let them make you beg for your life. Don't play cowards. It'll kill your career." And it sort of like kind of saw that a little bit. It's a level of unctuous. Like even in the second season, when I was going back after being a regular for a season, and I called Scott. "So, Scott, any forecast that you could share with me in terms of the redemption storyline for old Gregory?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Because I think I played every color in the unctuous rainbow. And I don't know what I have left in me." And he goes, "Yeah, the thing about the unctuous with Gregory, it's more of a feature than a bug." And I hadn't heard that expression before a few years ago. So no redemption. He's just bad. Just a bad man. Okay. All right. And so it went the course that it did. Well, it was fun.
Were you okay with them hanging the character in the show?
Okay with which?
Hanging. They hang.
No, that's basically why I took it, because I have a death reel on YouTube, Xander Berkeley death reel. And you'll see there's a lot of variation, and I'd never died of a hanging before. And so I wanted to be at the end of a rope one way or another in that death reel, because I got 3 plane crashes, 3 falls from 30 stories, and I've got gunshots from every direction, and cut open every way imaginable. So I needed to get a good hanging in.
Do you ever do the conventions where the cast gets together and you're at a convention signing autographs and things?
Yeah, a little bit, not too much. It was always like, again, I have so many old school ideas stuck in my head of the distinction between film and television is one that is completely gone now.
Mm-hmm.
But conventions were sort of seen as the bone orchard for actors at one point. When you weren't getting work anymore, you had to cash in the spoils on previous work. But it was part of the culture with The Walking Dead. And especially in Atlanta, there was the Walker Stalker Con.
Yeah.
Very controversial. People that ran it were kind of dodgy.
Yeah.
But you were there in Atlanta, you get to go to one and you see the fans. It was kind of like a wild experience. But again, for me, I didn't do a lot of them because they didn't want the douchebags autograph, the cowards autograph.
Right.
They wanted, if you could be almost anything but a coward, but they would come by and they go, they'd scowl at you.
Yeah, I know.
Man.
You're that guy. Yeah.
But maybe if I'd done pictures with my face with a dartboard target superimposed, I would have done better at those things.
Did you do any makeup for Gregory or anything, or how you wanted him specifically to look?
Jamie Kellman and I had worked together before, and he was the guy that designed the look with me for the character, and we just, as meticulously as possible, created, just like I did with any of the sequences that had been suggested in the comic book
mm-hmm.
that were being written into the series. I had big blow-ups of those comic strips in my room, and I just did from the very beginning, along with designing the makeup to look as much like the comic book as possible. I wanted to get the body language and incorporate those different, almost like I was saying, the dots of Terminator 2, those sequences of the arms, they then have to fill the dots in between. Before starting to film, I just had them, there were 2 beds in the room where I was staying, this weird place where they put me up. And I had them all laid out on the other bed, and I just kept sort of just doing whatever it was that Gregory had to do in the comic book. And that was what informed me of the body language of the character, the way he would move. And I would, as meticulously as possible, try and recreate a shot from the comic book when it was in a scene that was written. It's fun.
Yeah, because it was based on comics.
Yeah.
Originally. Yeah.
And the hardcore fans know those comics, and so it was fun to play to that.
Right. Did you get along with the cast? Was there anybody special in that cast that you liked working with?
Well, like I mentioned, just working with Stephen Ogg, he and I had so much stuff together that we just had a blast. Gregory and Maggie are at odds in a different way, and there was so much humor written into the stuff with Gregory and Simon. It was just funny. So I think those scenes that are written to be funny on some level in a nervous way are easier. There were a couple of scenes that was really fun with the Maggie character, like where he's, but when they're really antagonistic towards each other, it's hard to sort of have as much fun in the same way.
Yeah,
I do have to say that Andrew Lincoln remains one of my. I was so impressed by the way he. One of the rare cases where the number one on the call sheet is like it really gives you the feeling that you're all pulling on the same end of the rope, and not that they're better and superior and above and have more power, which can happen, and make it stressful sometimes on set. He was just such a hero. He would just take care of everybody, and he would, like, whether it was off camera or whatever, he just gave himself 100%. And when some day player would come on, he'd have his arm around him, introducing him, and making him feel at home. And it's just such a beautiful quality.
Yeah.
And that set a tone from the top down. It's like when the star of the show is behaving that way, everybody behaves properly. It's
Right.
like
Right. Did you
great bunch of people, though, I have to say, and I have done a couple of conventions. I did a couple of them, and I'm going to be doing one in Germany, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody because they're just great people.
Yeah. Okay, so you're also a sculptor and a painter. Tell me about your approach to painting.
Well,
It's a visual art too.
yeah, and a lot of it had to do with I have an older sister, couple of years older than me, and she sort of staked out the art turf, and I sort of had a sense that was her territory. I had to stake out my own, and the theater was there from the beginning with me. It was easy, but my father would give us art supplies every birthday and Christmas, and I was drawn to sculpting early on and working in wood and clay, and just drawn to sculpting, but I drew all the time. And for me, being on location on films, I would always, one of the first days on location, I'd find the art store in town, and oftentimes by a university or something. And, I would, and especially if they don't speak English and I'm playing the bad guy, I got a lot of time off while they're doing good guy stuff. And I would just sit in cafes and draw people from all over the world wherever I was filming. I was always just very drawn to drawing, and a lot of times you'd get sort of some professor would recognize you because they teach film and they recognize you from different roles you played and invite you into the intelligentsia of that culture, and you get to see inside another world, and that was part of the thing that drew me to acting. As a character, you get to time travel and shape shift. But then with film, what I loved about the film world was that they would fly you all over the world, and you were there as a worker, not a tourist, and you could insinuate yourself into another world and learn all about it in a lot of ways, and extraordinary experience.
You recently did Reagan, and you've got another movie where you play a homeless person. Tell me about shooting that, and when is that going to be available?
Well, I've been going back and forth between billionaires and hobos.
Yeah.
But that seems to be what I'm cast as with this particular look. They said, no, don't. We'll make it work. I think George Shultz, who was Secretary of State under Reagan, got to be pretty wealthy by the end. I know, amazing guy. It was an honor to play him.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie, in Butcher's Crossing, I played like a kind of a hobo, one-armed, crazy fella, the cook and mule team driver, the small little posse that Nicolas Cage led the band of those decimating the last buffalo in the Old West,
Yeah.
the 1870s, and then on a show with Octavia Spencer, Truth Be Told, I played a billionaire Gates kind of like character,
Mm-hmm.
and then now I have this movie No Address coming out where I have another movie coming out where I play a multi-billionaire munitions manufacturer. So I do keep swinging back and forth.
Yeah.
And, in No Address, the film that's about to come out, I'm going to be in LA for the premiere on the 18th, and then the film comes out on the 28th.
Mm-hmm.
2,000 theaters across the country. Deals with the subject of homelessness, and there was a documentary film that they did in conjunction with it. So I really learned a lot about
that world,
the issue of homelessness, and I had always been interested, and I'd always spent time with people on the street, just looking out for people. You always felt like if you saw somebody and gave them some food and sat down with them and listened to their story, that you were helping at least on a small scale. And I had a lot of impressions of spending time with those people over the years. So I incorporated that, and the characters, a vet who's also a painter and paints the different characters in the film in their little encampment family. And so they hired me as an actor and as a painter for the film, and that was interesting. It was.
And did you do your own makeup on some of those?
Yeah.
You had to make yourself look homeless.
Yeah.
How did you approach that? What did you look specifically for to look that way?
Well, going all the way back to the film Sid and Nancy is when I started to get my real education in film makeup as distinct from the theater. And I played a junkie and a street person kind of junkie in that movie, and had gotten the part because I had done my own makeup and showed up on set as myself, and the director was appalled, thinking that he'd found a junkie that could miraculously act naturally in front of the camera. But I had a technique of breaking capillaries with a delicate brush and making the eyes red and weathered, and then there's a charcoal, there's this stuff called Texas dirt that they use in the wardrobe department all the time to powder people down to make them look dusty and dirty. And there's one that is like a soot one, and they sell it in the makeup stores, and I always have that in my kit. But to be able to just do a patina of, because when you're out on the streets and you don't get to take showers, there's the residue of car part, not only exhaust, but the particulate from tires is one of the big environmental hazards of cars in LA. And those guys would always just have that gray patina on them. And so that was something I went for. And, it's just, again, the minute you look at yourself and you see that, you don't feel like you have to, it's like you're there. And you just be that person.
The makeup helps you get into character.
Absolutely. It always has.
So if someone wanted to purchase a sculpture or a painting from you, how would they go about doing that?
I've had shows and at galleries and where I've sold my work, and I've been approached through social media and stuff, saying, "Gosh, I like your work. What do?" And I've done some portraits. I did it at the conventions when other people had lines around the block, and I just they weren't. I set up a little booth for myself a couple of times to do drawings of people, and so that felt like something more than just next. It was like you could focus and do a portrait for X amount of money for 10 minutes, and I like working quickly because I did my cafe drawings for decades at the speed of life. So you got to catch something before somebody moves. And a lot of my painting has been portrait work. So it's because I'm interested in the psychology of a character and people. That's what drew me to acting, and in the artwork I've been more representational, and I'm playing a character now who's also a painter, but an abstract expressionist painter, and I'm having to work really big and on a larger scale, and then I'm having to do some abstract work that I haven't done before. So it's really exciting to be pushed out of my habitual comfort zone and work in a different way.
Do you have a website or a place where people can find your artwork?
There's some stuff up at XanderOriginal.com. Someone runs a website for me, and I just haven't been very active with it. But there's a menu, and you can hit art there and see some of my work. And you can communicate to me through that, and they convey to me messages that come in. And yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Xander, thank you so much for being my guest. This has been a wonderful conversation. I have all of these notes, and I probably covered like 4 or 5 things on them. So maybe we'll do another show at
We'll
some
have to
point.
chat again. I know there's the names of these movies I have coming out. Some I can't say, but some I could. And Major Barbara is the one besides No Address, and I think that's going to be in June, May actually.
Uh-huh.
Barkley, the multi-billionaire munitions manufacturer,
Uh-huh.
and a movie written by George Bernard Shaw in 1905 as a play, and then the director did his rewrite to update it, but it remains a cross between then and now, and between being it was written in England, and you can't tell if you're in England or in America, or if you're in the past, the future, and
Huh.
it's super interesting. I'm very excited to see it.
That's going to
But
be.
yeah, No Address is one coming up next, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm looking forward to seeing it on the 18th.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for being my guest, and we will see you next time on The J.
Okay, Jay.
Michael Show.
Goodbye.